Y'all ready to be history?
Get started.
Welcome.
Hi.
Hello, everyone.
To the Pro Audio Suite.
These guys are professional. They're motivated.
Thanks to TriBooth, the best vocal booth for home or on-the-road voice recording. And Austrian Audio, making passion heard. Introducing Robert Marshall from Source Elements and Someone Audio Post, Chicago. Darren Robbo Robertson from Voodoo Radio Imaging, Sydney. Tech to the VO Stars, George the Tech Whittam from LA. And me, Andrew Peters, voiceover talent and home studio guy.
Line up, learner!
Here we go.
Welcome to another Pro Audio Suite, thanks to TriBooth. Don't forget the code, TRIPAP200, and Austrian Audio, making passion heard. Talking about Austrian Audio, we've had a few chats off air. Robert and I, actually last week, having a bit of a chat about how damn good their microphones are. And then you mentioned, Robert, that you actually bumped into their marketing guy at CES.
Yeah, I was trying to be aware of other things and try to expand the world beyond the audio world. And, well, they were there, and I couldn't get away from audio. It was kind of weird. I had no idea that they were even going to be at the show. And they were in some sort of, like, Austrian pavilion booth or something. So there's other businesses, and there they were with their mics. They actually had a pair of headphones that they weren't going to sell, which were some sort of noise-canceling headphones that they were playing around with. But they had one mic there. I can't remember what it was now. And we were just talking with them, and they had a customer there. I think they were like a podcast type customer, and I just was standing there and had to throw in my 2 cents that how great we thought the mics were, and then I chatted with him for quite a while after that. It was really a trip to kind of see him there because I didn't associate them in the sort of consumer electronics world.
Yeah, but I think they've moved kind of in some of their bits and pieces in that area, with the headphone mics and all that kind of stuff, for people who are streaming.
Exactly. There's so many spaces.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many spaces for their stuff that consumer electronics is like everything that you can't fit into a different. It's not just about stuff that you and I would want. There's a lot of business to business stuff as well going on at the Consumer Electronics Show.
But I thought the interesting thing that you told me was that he, being a marketing guy, listens to our podcast. And
I said the scary thing was that he was getting like information from us and listening to what we said. That's
Gosh, misguided, isn't he?
Yeah.
I was like, really?
Wow.
Like I thought you guys were super smart and made these great microphones. Like, everything, not us.
Yeah. But it's funny though, because I do remember you said, when he said, we all listened to the podcast. And then you went, holy shit.
Yeah, I was like, all of a sudden I was like, uh-oh.
Funny.
Yeah,
but it's good to know we at least had some.
No, he genuinely seemed like he really liked it. He kind of liked the advice, and they really like hearing about the real world uses of the mics, things like that.
Yeah.
So,
which is good for them.
It was real.
Good feedback for them.
Totally.
Now, talk about real world. If you've got any memory or you've listened to the show before, quite a while ago we had Gomez on from Waves, and we were talking about clarity. Then just shortly afterwards, a guy sent us a file, because we did say about recording yourself on an aeroplane. And this guy recorded himself on an aeroplane.
Someone had to do it.
And to see if it would work. It's been sitting on the shelf for quite some time. In fact, I think, Robbo, you were prodded by him. Have you actually done this show? You went, we better do it.
So this was back in May last year, to put this in some perspective. So apology to George. George Nowik. I'm guessing. Apologies if I get that wrong. Nowik.
I've seen that name around.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, he's a big fan of the show.
He had a good voice actually.
Yeah, he sounds great. So here's what he wrote. He said, attached to this email are 2 samples recorded. One from the airplane with a noise tail, and one from a pillow fort in a hotel room using the same setup. The noise floor in the hotel room is embarrassingly high, and I'd do things to it if I were submitting something to someone. But for the purposes of the experiment, it's completely raw audio. Can't wait to hear what Clarity can do to the airplane one. So to make this work for our show, I've to be honest with you, I've ignored the hotel room file. But what I thought might be an interesting experiment was to see if we could take his airplane file, and as we talked about on the show, actually could Clarity make it usable for a finished audio. So that was kind of my challenge to myself, and I also threw it at Robert.
Extreme?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
I mean, you saw my answer. My answer was like, don't record audio on an airplane.
Yes, true.
well, I've got something to play you a bit later on, which might sort of be a counterintuitive, but is probably an argument that maybe you might want to record audio in an airplane. But to start with, and I guess to kick this all off, let's just have a listen. This is what George sent us.
Greetings to Robbo, Andrew, Robert, and the vastly superior George at the Pro Audio Suite podcast. This message comes to you from a moderately inferior George, presently soaring at 35,000 feet above the spacious and mostly barren flatlands of the American Midwest. This is the sound of a 41.6 plugged into a Steinberg UR-RT2 with enough ambient interior airplane noise to strangle a moose. There is no pop filter on the microphone, and proximity effect is being utilized for miles. Let's see if the neural network voodoo magic of waves clarity can do anything to make this sample even remotely useful.
All right. And then he kindly gave me some room ambience.
Yeah, beautiful. Just in case you have to cut in.
Yeah, just in case I needed to cut in. Exactly. So, so that by itself, the fact that we can these days record a voiceover in an airplane is pretty cool.
Yeah,
but
true.
yeah, so that was what he sent me. So my first thought was, okay, let's just throw this into Clarity, and I was using the Pro version just to disclosure. So this was getting rid of the noise pretty much completely, but I pretty much had Clarity working at its maximum. So this is what came out.
Greetings to Robbo, Andrew, Robert, and the vastly superior George at the Pro Audio Suite podcast. This message comes to you from a moderately inferior George, presently soaring at 35,000 feet above the spacious and mostly barren flatlands of the American Midwest. This is the sound of a 41.6 plugged into a Steinberg UR-RT2 with enough ambient interior airplane noise to strangle a moose. There is no pop filter on the microphone, and proximity effect is being utilized for miles. Let's see if the neural network voodoo magic of waves clarity can do anything to make this sample even remotely useful.
There we go.
Sounds like Max Headroom.
It does. So
now, the reality is you throw a music track behind that with the desperate enough producer, and someone might put that.
Well, it's funny you should say that, Robert, because that's where I'm headed. So, so look. No airplane noise, but pretty much unusable. Let's be honest.
Really.
So what I did was, the next thing I did was I found that by playing around in Clarity, the setting that I was left on with a couple of other settings in the Pro version was basically 60% voice. So this was just after Clarity itself. So this is what I was ended up with.
Greetings to Robbo, Andrew, Robert, and the vastly superior George at the Pro Audio Suite podcast.
So that's a 60%.
So that was at 60%. So there's still a couple of letters that like his Pro Audio Suite sounds like Bro Audio Suite and blah blah blah. But it was sort of a trade-off. For where I was headed with this thing as to sort of what I was happy with. So the next thing I did was I threw RX in after it and then some EQ and compression, obviously not too much compression because otherwise it'd be just sucking the noise back up, which happened anyway. So then I finished off with just a touch of NS1.
Oh, interesting.
So this is what I ended up with.
Greetings to Robbo, Andrew, Robert, and the vastly superior George at the Pro Audio Suite podcast. This message comes to you from a moderately inferior George.
So I've got to apologize for the EQ and compression. It was late at night and it was one of those ones, yeah, that sounds good. And then heard it this morning and went, it actually doesn't. But anyway.
Yeah.
So there you go. So that's where I ended up. So finally, thinking that, the challenge here was to make something that would go to air, I chucked some music under it. So this is where I ended up.
Greetings to Robbo, Andrew, Robert, and the vastly superior George at the Pro Audio Suite podcast. This message comes to you from a moderately inferior George, presently soaring at 35,000 feet above the spacious and mostly barren flatlands of the American Midwest.
So effectively, I think Robert's right. Yes, at a very big pinch, you could probably get away with it, but I don't know that recording your voiceover on an aeroplane is going to work even with clarity.
I will say I've actually heard things that are not that much better on air.
Yeah.
So I reckon you could get away with it, but it depends where it's going to be played, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think I'd want to send it out.
My end conclusion was like, clarity is not the end-all miracle worker, but it is amazing. And so I did a couple of approaches, sort of like you did, but I was a little bit more like, what can everything do, and then what would I do is the approach I took.
Yep.
So here's a bunch of stuff, you guys.
Greetings to Robbo, Andrew, Robert, and the vastly superior George at the Pro Audio Suite podcast. This message comes to you from a moderately inferior George.
Okay, so you heard that.
That sounds pretty similar to full on, is it?
We'll cover that.
Okay, cool.
Here's 2.
Okay, cool.
Greetings to Robbo, Andrew, Robert, and the vastly superior George at the Pro Audio Suite podcast. This message comes to you from a moderately inferior George, presently soaring at 35,000 feet above the spacious and mostly barren flatlands of the American Midwest.
That's broad 2.
All right, and then here we go on a third one.
Greetings to Robbo, Andrew, Robert, and the vastly superior George at the Pro Audio Suite podcast. This message comes to you from a moderately inferior George, presently soaring at 35,000 feet above the spacious and mostly barren flatlands of the American Midwest.
All right, then we get up to number 4.
Greetings to Robbo, Andrew, Robert, and the vastly superior George at the Pro Audio Suite podcast. This message comes to you from a moderately inferior George, presently soaring at 35,000 feet above the spacious and mostly barren flatlands of the American Midwest. Greetings to Robbo, Andrew, Robert, and the vastly superior George at the Pro Audio Suite podcast. This message comes to you from a moderately inferior George, presently soaring at 35,000 feet above the spacious and mostly barren flatlands of the American Midwest.
And then 6.
Greetings to Robbo, Andrew, Robert, and the vastly superior George at the Pro Audio Suite podcast. This message comes to you from a moderately inferior George, presently soaring at 35,000 feet above the spacious and mostly barren flatlands of the American Midwest.
7.
Greetings to Robbo, Andrew, Robert, and the vastly superior George at the Pro Audio Suite podcast. This message comes to you from a moderately inferior George, presently soaring at 35,000 feet above the spacious and mostly barren flatlands of the American Midwest. Greetings to Robbo, Andrew, Robert, and the vastly superior George at the Pro Audio Suite podcast. This message comes to you from a moderately inferior George.
All right, George, how's your ego?
Out of control at this point, I'm
Better
guessing.
than ever. My favorite was number 3. If that's what we're doing. If we're voting, I would pick number 3.
Number 3 is the one you would use, okay? Yeah. And Andrew, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm probably about the same, I reckon.
So what those are is this. One is 100% with clarity. And I forget, I played around with the bands thing, and I forget which one I ended up on. But number 2 is 85% clarity. Number 3, 60% clarity, which is, I believe, where Robbo ended up as well.
That's where I landed, yeah.
Then number 4 is Waves X noise and not Z noise, which I could not make as well as X noise personally. I don't know why. So that's Waves Z noise, but with my usual soup of a little bit of multi-band expansion before it and a little bit of high pass, low pass as well ahead of the X, the old fingerprint style remover. Number 5 is 60% clarity plus the X noise process.
Okay, yep.
Which actually I thought was the second best one. But it has that echoey quality that X noise gives things.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know what I mean.
Definitely.
Yep.
6 was just a high pass filter, like at 400. 7, I believe, was NS1. And then
That was weird.
8 was WNS.
Yeah.
7 was weird, man.
That was weird.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
what was the last one? WNS?
WNS, which both of those take out various degrees of, I mean, NS1 takes out less noise but leaves more high end.
Yep.
But WNS, depending on where you're moving the knobs, you definitely take out a lot of high end.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
And it shows kind of the frequency spectrum of that background noise, which was kind of more of a lower, it's not white noise back there, obviously.
So what's the takeaway?
But no, I think that the clarity at 100% creates a bubbly, definitely computer sounding kind of thing. And you definitely have to like tame it down and use a percentage. I'm not sure that, like, what's great about clarity is it does leave the voice fairly natural sounding.
Yeah.
Which is great. But you can't get rid of all the noise. But it does seem like if you want to go for that complete, like, I'm sure it probably would have been even better if you combine RX with clarity like you did, because I just didn't have RX. But some sort of mild version of both, then you're getting rid of different, I don't know, it seems to be a good combo, possibly.
Well, firstly, it's the impossible mission for any sort of noise reduction, let's be honest. Airplane.
Yeah.
Trying to do that. I mean, Jesus. And I would agree with Robert. I think
don't record on an airplane.
Yeah. Out of all the ones that I tried, clarity certainly cleaned it up the best to begin with.
Yeah, and amazingly has the simplest process, right? You're just like one knob.
Yeah.
There's not a lot to do with it. It's kind of frustrating because you're like, oh, this is so good. I want to get closer.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Well, that I see. The first time around, I threw another clarity in after the first one. But it didn't work as well as putting RX in there. So obviously the two different algorithms, I'm presuming that they use, was enough to sort of make it better to do it that way than to do two clarities.
I think that each algorithm, this is exactly what I think it is. So each algorithm at its extreme sounds bad. That's obvious.
Yes.
And so you have to leave clarity at that 60% point where you get still a good bed of noise. Mm-hmm. Then something like RX can take care of some level of that noise.
Yeah, definitely.
But in a different way. So it has, but you're using each where the amount of artifacts they throw in are the minimum amount of artifacts with as much usable noise reduction as you can. And between the two, you do get more noise reduction compared to just using one where the process becomes so obvious that you don't want to use that much of that process.
Yeah.
Because clarity has a gating effect. You can clearly hear it chopping away down there if you turn it all the way up. And even at 85%.
Well, you can adjust the gate on the Pro.
Yeah. And in all honesty, I probably could have spent more time on it.
I'm completely with you. I spent, as you can probably hear, I spent, 20 minutes, half an hour on it at the most, just because. But I mean, that in itself is interesting. I mean, the fact that I could sort of pull that result in 20 minutes to something that was not almost usable, but getting close to usable, or approaching usable, I suppose. In just 20 minutes, if you had the time to spend on it, who knows what you might pull out.
But the other thing is with you, Robbo, like forget a radio spot or a commercial. If you're doing like, just a normal like doco or something and someone actually does their piece to camera, even though the mic's, the proximity is fine, but the background noise is out of control, you could actually sort that out.
Yeah, you could pull it out of the file.
Well.
Definitely. Some of the crap that I've been asked to clean up, and I'm sure Robert has over the years.
Who's got the big noise feeding into us?
What's that?
Like a fan noise?
Like it's not me.
A fan noise? Is that what you're hearing? Whoever's just muted themselves.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's you.
That's not my usual ambient noise. That's like some sort of...
We use clarity, don't worry.
Mechanical noise.
I have a little bit of noise show and tell.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
I'll keep it brief. So this was just trying out a bunch of new plugins that are in the vein of Waves Clarity VX, right? So this is I will play the first 20 seconds of the raw audio, then I will play the first 20 seconds of the same raw audio with 4 different plugins being used, not sequentially, just 4 different types of noise reduction plugins, and just let you guys be the judge, just like Robert just did.
Okay.
Is that cool?
Yeah.
Okay, here's the first one. This is, so to paint the picture, I hit record, I walked over to my studio door, shut the door, came over, sat down, and started talking. Okay, here we go.
All right, this is most actors' worst nightmare. Small aircraft noise flying overhead, obviously completely ruining a take. Unless you have Extract Dialogue by Acon Digital, or Clarity Waves VX.
There's the first one. Okay, next one.
All right, this is most actors' worst nightmare.
Huh.
Small aircraft noise flying overhead, obviously completely ruining a take. Unless you have Extract Dialogue by Acon Digital or Clarity Waves VX.
All right.
All right.
Oh, it's still there behind.
Next one.
All right, this is most actors' worst nightmare. Small aircraft noise flying overhead, obviously completely ruining a take. Unless you have Extract Dialogue by Acon Digital or Clarity Waves VX.
All right, the third sample in my thing sucks, so I'm going to skip it. And here's the fourth one, the last one I'm going to play. Again, same length of time, door slam, the whole thing.
All right, this is most actors' worst nightmare. Small aircraft noise flying overhead, obviously completely ruining a take. Unless you have Extract Dialogue by Acon Digital or Clarity Waves VX.
All right, there's my 3 samples. So
The last one by far was the best, but you could tell it was gated.
I'm going to guess that the last one was Clarity. I'm going to guess that.
okay.
I'm going to go.
There's always a gate on, like 2 of them had a strong gate to it. But the last one was probably the best one, I think.
Yeah. And I don't think it's Clarity.
Well, it's not fair because I didn't name all 3 of the products that I was trying out, but you heard 2 of the 3 names being mentioned in the recording.
One was RX, was it?
It was Bruce Free, the last one.
No,
yes.
it wasn't. I did not test Bruce Free in this case. No.
That's yeah.
Oh, you love that
That's
thing.
brilliant. That one. Yeah.
Yeah. So the first sample, which completely removed the door slam entirely and the first part of my voice, if you noticed,
Yep.
it did this, right? Random noises.
Yeah.
Instead of, let's just make some random noises. Right? So it got rid of the just make some.
Because the let's just is under the threshold. That's why. It's
Yeah.
I guess so, right?
Yeah.
And also right after an event, so it thinks it's still
It
in
was
a...
totally
yeah,
confused
it's all
what to
part
do.
of the same
right?
event. Yeah.
But it completely erased the door slam, 100%. It was completely gone.
Yeah.
Which I thought was so bizarre. So that plugin is Acon Extract Dialogue. That's what it's called.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was pretty interesting and pretty good at what it could do. The next sample, unfortunately, what maybe not painted in the best of light in this test, that was Clarity VX. So
really?
you heard the
Holy
airplane
crap.
kind of start, and then you heard the airplane kind of sort of fade away as the algorithm
figured
started
it
to
out.
learn and learn.
So you did it from
probably
scratch.
should have let it train for
Yeah.
a while and train on my voice, right? But again, I did the same test with all 4. I didn't give any one of them special
Yep.
compensation,
Fair enough.
dispensation. I just did the same thing over and over.
Yep.
Lastly, the last one you heard is one called Ascentize Voice Gate.
Huh.
And that was the one that you thought stood out,
Yeah.
Andrew.
Which one is that?
Too.
It's called Ascentize Voice Gate. Voice Gate, one word. And that one was really fascinating to me because they call it a gate, but it was so clearly beyond a gate, right? It was like it removed the door slam, it did all kinds of different magic voodoo to the audio.
And that's made by Ascentize, I guess.
Yeah. So this all came up when I was getting ready to teach a webinar that I did last week called Next Level Production Techniques for Voiceover. And I just started digging around looking for, well, what are some of the other crazy AI-driven plugins that are out there in the market? Because clearly it was the year of AI, right? Everybody was building AI. And that one popped up on my radar, and I thought it was pretty cool. So I threw that one into the mix. So
Well, I'm going to go look that up when we're done.
The competition is heating up very rapidly in the space of AI when it comes to plugins and everybody else getting into the game,
It's interesting. I do think that that Waves was the first one. Like their timing was impeccable in the sense that this kind of stuff was being sold to people that make web meeting rooms. Like I know that, for instance, Zoom has had like a call with some company that's selling them like remove the background noise, use this thing, use that thing. We can remove the dog barking, and there's been that business to business use of it.
Yeah.
Right. But then Waves comes out with the plugin of this whole type of tech.
Right.
And they do it, I guess, just before Acorn, just before the other ones. Mm-hmm. They beat Isotope to it, who's the ones that you thought would have been the ones coming out with it first.
Yep.
And they have that first meet
And then RX-10 came out, but by the time they had that in the pipeline, Waves was already out. So RX-10 comes along and it feels a little antiquated. It feels behind the times because they,
Clarity
they don't have the AI tool yet. So for sure they're working on one. I'm sure of that. So yeah, it was just interesting hearing how they all handled that scenario differently.
I thought the last one was really interesting because I couldn't hear the aeroplane under your voice either, because most of them you could still hear artifacts of the aeroplane.
Yeah.
But I don't know whether it was me, but I didn't seem to hear any aeroplane at all.
It did seem to vacuum it out. It was pretty crazy. And it seems like that tool is using kind of like a cornucopia or a variety of algorithms and tools in one plugin. Like I feel like that one is using AI as well as other like multi-band expander technology and other things to try to find the best combination of all those tools. Like I feel like that's what it was doing. When I played around with it, I was like, wow, it's called a gate, but it's so much more than a gate. It's doing clearly AI driven tools and there's a lot going on. So I thought that was the real surprise to me, because I've known Acon for many years, and of course we know Waves and Isotope, but this Sentize company came out of left field, and that was a new one to me.
Okay, here's an interesting exercise then. With that Sentize, or whatever it's called, a Sentize plugin gate, what if you heavily compressed that file? What would it do?
To see what it's doing.
Would it sustain a good sound output with a heavy compression applied to it?
I'm just wondering what it would drag up with compression.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, you would hear what it doesn't do. What it's you'd hear it's like what it's trying to hide. You'd bring out its failings essentially.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that would be interesting to see what that result would be. I mean, I've got compressors I can throw on it. Let's see.
Because I know for like if you're working remotely and you decide you're going to sort of disguise the fact you're in a hotel room with bad acoustics and an air conditioner running, that you decide you're going to use something to cover it up, like Clarity or RX or whatever, and then it gets sent off, and then someone, because it's going to be a radio promo or something, and it's going to have the bejesus compressed out of it, and all the shit that you've thought you've hidden
that's right.
comes flying out.
You're absolutely right.
It's like a flood in a graveyard.
Yeah.
Yep. Here's 9 dB of
flood in the graveyard. I like that.
I guess that's come up because of California's situation.
I would say.
Did anybody build a graveyard on a side of a mountain?
Jeez.
Here's 9 dB of makeup gain with compression, right? So
okay.
All right, this is most actors' worst nightmare. Small aircraft noise flying overhead, obviously completely ruining a take. Unless you have Extract Dialogue by Acon Digital.
There you go.
Wow.
It's pretty good.
You can still hear the gatey action to it. It makes it more clear that like that cliff at the end.
Yeah.
Tiny bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
it's
obviously you
not
throw
bad.
that in production and that would probably
Gone.
Yeah. Put
And
some
again,
music
I know
under
that wasn't on a plane at 35,000 feet. I know that was a different type of noise floor, but that was with the dreaded slow passing single engine godforsaken flying fucking Harley Davidsons that take off from Santa Monica Airport right outside my door all day long. Right, that's what that sounds like. And
They sound like a long drawn out fart.
Yes, they do. Yes,
I mean,
indeed.
some of them literally sound like an open pipe Harley Davidson just that has 4 cylinders just flying over your head. I'm like, why is that legal?
Yeah, exactly.
It's so bad. It's so annoying. But there you go.
Yeah.
Well, that was a fun experiment.
Yeah, and I think your plugin sounds like a bit of a winner.
Yeah.
A Sentize Voice Gate is out of Germany. No surprise there. A lot of these best amazing plugin tools come from Europe. And it's a $150 plugin.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's
good.
not bad.
That's pretty good compared to Clarity,
it's
which is
competitive with Clarity. Yeah, it's competitive.
Yeah, it's less expensive than Clarity. I mean, I spent more on that on Clarity and just the sale.
and it's certainly cheaper than RX.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on in this space, and who's going to win in the voiceover field is really going to be who does the best job marketing to the voiceover industry.
Yeah.
Because all these guys are out there and they're really all marketing to different verticals, like.
Yep.
I probably hadn't heard of this one because they probably are marketing to video and film post. Is my guess.
Yeah.
They've got one called D-Room. They have one called D-Room Pro, which are...
Well, and then they also have Chameleon, which
Chameleon's very
emulates the
interesting.
room.
Right, yeah. So that's they're a very high-level pro-level tool set that they're focused. Instead of making 1,000 different plugins, they are all focused on restoring, essentially all doing one thing, restoring dialogue. I mean, they do have a tube saturator, but everything else is mostly about trying to deal with rooms and dialogue sound and trying to get it as clean as possible.
Wow.
Very cool. There you go.
And matching up, very much seems like they're in the ADR space.
Yeah. That's what I mean. You won't know about these tools unless you dig around because they don't market to music or really
voiceover,
podcasting, or really any of the forms of audio production.
Yeah. Yep. Actually, you know what? That's not a bad thing if you're a voice talent. Instead of doing it yourself and making a hash of it, if you are on the road and working from a hotel room, if you've got a really good client that you work, daily or weekly with, that gives you, pays you a lot of money and, gives you a lot of work, buy it for them.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Here's
I'm going to be sending you some shit audio, but here you go, have a plug-in.
This will fix it. Yeah.
Yeah.
My gift to you.
Nice. So I was feeling a bit silly yesterday afternoon when I was mucking around with this thing, and it did occur to me that there's probably one scenario that recording in an aeroplane would actually be really good for.
Greetings to Robbo, Andrew, Robert, and the vastly superior George at the Pro Audio Suite podcast. This message comes to you from a moderately inferior George.
Ding dong. This is your captain.
That's a perfect
You can all put
way to
your
apply that
seatbelts on.
and make it become part of the practical effect. And it worked perfectly.
We had a guy in the booth. We had a script for him. He was a famous person in the baseball world, and he could not read the script at all. And what we ended up with was a whole pile of shit and outtakes. And he had the tendency to just go off the cuff and say crap as he fucked up.
Yeah.
And then the next day, because we never even got the complete script from him, I don't think, the writer and I sat there the whole day and made a spot out of shit that he said.
Yeah, nice.
Well, the fine art of doing that is going to be replaced completely 100% by AI, because I can already open Descript and retype a sentence of dialogue and it will re-speak it with my own human voice. So
God, that's frightening.
It's already here. So
Yeah.
I can make myself say what I want, and I can make anybody else say whatever I want. So that's already here.
It's crazy.
Well,
right?
it's another industry that I've been involved in. It's going to be taken over by sports people and comedians by the looks.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, fuck. What can I do next?
Well, that was fun. Is it over?
The Pro Audio Suite, with thanks to Tribooth and Austrian Audio, recorded using Source Connect, edited by Andrew Peters and mixed by Voodoo Radio Imaging, with tech support from George the Tech Whittam. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and join in the conversation on our Facebook group. To leave a comment, suggest a topic, or just say g'day, drop us a note at our website, theproaudiosuite.com.